were desirous of it. Well, we had the guy in the meat bar, but the same guy over 40 years as he grew with them and so on. So he wanted something new.
Okay, Kuvav Amud Aleph 106a. We're discussing. The last thing we had was Bilam's elaborate advice to Balak on how to entice the Jewish people, selling them linen, as we thought, and as you mentioned just now. It's, as you were saying it reminded me that as you mentioned in Yuma, the Gemara said that the Kohen Gadol would order linen from Egypt, and it was very expensive. Someone mentioned that yesterday also, that linen at the time was... Anyway, selling linen was the way to get them into these... Sorry,
the side doors going. What do I push to?
Six. Thank you.
Yeah, and if they're selling it at a really cheap discount.
Right, yeah.
That was like,
so entice people to come in.
Get some linen for a good price.
Yeah, please. And that's what brought them in, and then they had these women seduce them, and then finally to idol worship we discussed yesterday. And then the Gemara told us that happened in a place called Shittim. That's what the pasuk says. Vayesh b'Shittim, they were in Shittim, and there they were v'heichel azanes, and they began to behave promiscuously. And we discussed that Shittim means foolishness, and we discussed what that was all about. So in that vein, the Gemara tells us now the following. Some more discussions on discussions between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua, which were the two scholars discussing yesterday the meaning of the word Shittim. One which said that's just the name of the place, and Rabbi Shua who said that Shittim comes from the word shtus, which means foolishness. So in that vein, the Gemara continues, and on the basic level, it's just continuing in analyzing verses where they traveled and what the words mean, but they actually connect, as we'll see. So first the Gemara says like this. The Gemara quotes the verse, which is the very next verse. So the verse that we discussed yesterday was the Jews sat in Shittim, and they began to behave promiscuously with the daughters of Moav. And then it goes on to say, the next person, and the people called out to their gods, to the Moabite gods, as opposed to the Jewish gods, and this was because of the scheme that Balaam had set up for Balak in enticing the Jewish people. That's the story the Gemara filled in. So Rabbi Lezer says, V'tikra'ana, which we translate as they called upon, also could mean that they met. Like it happened to you, it came to you. So it says Rabbi Lezer, Arumais pagu behen, they were met with naked women. Quite simply. Arumais pagu behen, they met people who were unclothed. And that's what they met, that made them eventually call out to the other gods, as we explained at length before. Have a good day. Rabbi Shua says the word Vatikra'ena could also be understood to mean Shinasu Kulun Bali Kerian. They all became Bali Kerian. So the word Kerian comes from the same word as Vatikra'ena, which means they called out, but we're translating here. So three translations really. Vatikra'ena, they called out, that's the literal meaning. Then there's Elazar's reading Vatikra'ena means that they met these women. And then finally, Rabbi Shua's which is the word tikra'ena, they became a kera. What's kera? Kera is someone who experienced a seminal emission. Because they were so excited about the women, it resulted in the natural consequences. Okay. Now the Gemara gets like this. Now the apropos, as it were, to interpreting names of locations in this context, and that the names don't just mean the names of the place aren't just the names of the place, but actually have some meaning. The Gemara says the following: My lashon Refidim. What's Refidim? Refidim is one of the places that the Jews encamped, and specifically, Refidim is the last location before they went to Mount Sinai. In fact, when the verses we described earlier describing Shittim is in Bamidbar, where it describes the different locations they went to. But Refidim actually comes up much earlier as well. Refidim comes up in last week's parsha, in Yisrei. Before the Jews arrived at Sinai, it says, Vayisim Refidim, they traveled from Refidim. And Rashi, their comments, why telling us that they traveled from Refidim? We already know they were in Refidim. So obviously if they were in Refidim, they traveled from Refidim. And Rashi therefore comments there, talk about Rashi's commentary on the verse, which says that in the same way their arrival to the Midbar was tshuva, they repented. Their travel wasn't just a technical travel, but it was a spiritual journey. So likewise, they're leaving Refidim and going to Mount Sinai with tshuva, repentance. That's what Rashi there says. So repenting from what, as it were? Even though Rashi does not comment as to what the repenting was from in the Chumash. But here the Gemara kind of tells us what Refidim is, and therefore what traveling away from Refidim would mean going to Sinai. This is significant, as we'll see. Right? What does Refidim represent? What's the negativity of Refidim? Shittim is one of the locations we said comes from the word shtus, foolishness. They behaved foolishly by engaging with these women. So Refidim, which I just filled in for you, Rashi tells us that they travel from Refidim includes a tshuva, includes a repentance. So what does Refidim?
Wasn't that a place where they were asking for the meat? When they were camped there,
That was in Refidim?
There was a water. That's in the end of Parshat Pesach. They complained.
But which location was that? That was...
Refidim.
I heard
And we complained about waters in
the
Refidim?
city before. It had something to do with a revolting of
water.
the people. I don't think it was the water. Was
With
it?
the water, they had water, then they complained too much.
Complained
So
and-
Oh.
drink.
So maybe that's
And Amalek came
So on
and
the
attacked
simple
them.
reading of the pasuk, maybe that's why Rashi doesn't comment what their tshuva was, because that's the simple reading of the tshuva.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I didn't remember that was Refidim.
Yeah.
It's in Bishalach. What place is it where they complain?
Bishalach.
No, the water is Mara.
No, wait,
Yeah,
no,
the water's
there was Mara, and then there's
another one.
Another one here.
Okay, so there it is. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
In Refidim, they fought over
They fought over the water.
and therefore I guess Rashi is saying they're repenting from that fight
Yeah.
before they
And
traveled
Amalek came
to.
to attack them because they complained. That's part
Ah,
of the connection. This
Yeah,
whole thing. Yeah.
Amalek attacked.
That's because
but they called it then Masa Meriva.
the master. That's earlier. That's when they.
No, it's the next few lines.
Oh, yeah, but that's also.
Perek Chelek Masa Meriva. I'll read beneath all the necessary.
Yeah, the true bit of
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So they
There's
so
also
in,
Mara,
okay.
and there's
So on the
also
simple reading of the
Perek
pasuk and Rashi, the reason why they're doing teshuvah is because they fought. Okay, but here the Gemara gives a different interpretation of what the word Refidim means. And the Gemara says like this: My lashon Refidim. What's the name? What's the meaning of the word Refidim, which is this location, the last location before coming to Mount Sinai? So Rabbi Lezer says Refidim Shema. It was called Refidim the same way he said before that Shittim is just the name of a place. Don't read too much into it. Whereas Rabbi Shua disagreed and gave it a reading that Shittim comes from the word Shtus, which means foolishness. Here the Gemara says a similar thing. My Refidim, my lashon Refidim. What does Refidim mean? Rabbi Lezer Refidim Shema, which is called Refidim. Rabbi Shua says the word Refidim comes from the word Ripu, which means to weaken.
So it's Ripo Yadayim. It's two words here.
So 1 second, let's see. But actually the Gemara does not say the word Yadayim. But we're going to comment that in a second. But here the Gemara says this. Rabbi Shua says, Sherifu Atzman, they weaken themselves. The word Refidim comes from the word Ripu, which means to weaken. They weaken themselves Medivrei Torah from the study of Torah. Shnema, as the verse reads, and this is just a proof to this idea that the word Rifyoin means to weaken, or in the context specifically of Torah study. This is a verse in Yirmiyahu, and it's talking about the state of the Jewish people surrounding the destruction, and that they were not behaving the way they're supposed to. And it says, "Lehifnu avos elabanim." Fathers did not turn to their children to try to educate them properly. That's how Rashi reads it. Merifnyan yadayim, from the children's weakening of their hands in Torah study. So we see that rifyan, weakening, means weakening oneself from Torah study, and therefore the word Refidim means they weaken their hand. They're weakening themselves from Torah study. As Rabbi Gimel points out correctly,
Rashi points as well.
Rashi here also points out in the second pasuk, not on the pasuk Refidim. We'll get that. We'll get that. No.
It's a drash. Like one is mentioned, but Rashi understands it the same way.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
So the Gemara here says Rifu, it's Atzman, they weaken themselves. But the Medrash says, like Rabbi Gimel pointed out, that Refidim has two words, Ripu Yadayim, weaken their hands. And indeed, Rashi seems to be saying that over here as well. That Refidim means not just they weaken themselves, weaken their hands. Now, the Rebbe discusses a number of places, Chassidus discusses a number of places, why weakening their hands? If the issue here is Torah study, it should be weakening the minds. In other words, had we left just with the Gemara without Rashi's commentary, without the Midrash, she would say, Rifu Atzman, they weaken themselves from Torah study. Okay, that's all fine. But weaken your hands from Torah study? What does hands have to do with Torah study? And therefore, explains the Rebbe a number of locations, a number of places, that the issue here is not the intellectual pursuit of Torah study. The issue is weakening of their hands from Torah study, meaning to say that Torah study didn't lead to hands, to action, to Torah and mitzvahs. Which is why if you look at Rashi says, from weakening their hands, shall Torah mitzvahs, weakening their hands of Torah and mitzvahs. In other words, it's not just a question of Torah study, but the Torah study lacked in its follow-up, which is proper behavior. Which means that it's not just a question of they had Torah study that was good. They were lacking in something else. They were lacking in Torah and mitzvahs. In other words, like Mimanashaft. If the issue was they weaken their hands in mitzvahs, then why say divrei Torah? Just say dipu yudayan bekiyum mitzvahsav. They weaken their hands in mitzvahs. And if the issue is Torah study, then why say hands? Just say study. They weaken in the Torah study. There's a combination of both here. They weaken their hands, implying action, but hands in what? In Torah study. To say, all to say. That's right.
Weakening Torah eventually leads to
not just eventually, but weakening. If someone's Torah study does not include behavior as a result of his Torah study, then his Torah study is under question. In other words, this is something we talked about by the Framing a few weeks ago. The mistake of thinking that Torah is an academic pursuit. Someone who thinks that Torah is an academic pursuit, this is, and it's a very alluring mistake, because Torah is.
It's partly, but it has to.
Because Torah is very, engaging of the mind on multiple levels. Whatever type of brain you have, whatever type of thinking you like, it exists in Torah. Whether you're into mysticism, abstract thinking, whether you're into the legal analysis, whether philosophical, whatever you're into, you can find it in Torah. So a person can very easily get trapped in the idea of Torah knowledge for its own sake, which sounds beautiful. Just expand my Torah knowledge. But if it's a rifu yudayan, if it doesn't lead to behavior, then it's not just a question of, very nice, you have Torah study, but you're lacking action. Your Torah study is in question. Rifu yudayan b'divrei Torah. Your Torah itself is under question because it's lacking hand. It's lacking the action. Because if one understands that Torah is not just an academic pursuit, but it's a connection with Hashem, then the messages in Torah become pertinent to me, not just in terms of thinking of them in the abstract.
Also, the expression, maybe lidei maisa, to the hand.
That's right. So God, I actually saw this in the Bible also somewhere. Now that you mentioned, I forgot. I wanted to add this. The Gemara says elsewhere, the Gemara's discussion elsewhere about what's greater, Torah or mitzvahs. And the Gemara discusses we must say that Torah is greater. Why is Torah greater? Not because Torah in and of itself is greater, but because Torah leads to action. Right? Gadol Talmud, great is a study, shemevi lidei mais, which brings to the hands of action, using the same terminology, hands. But give us a similar thing. It's a similar statement. The other statement is called Talmud she'ein ima. I don't remember.
Like the Torah's equivalent to the mall, like all these things.
Yeah, well, that's actually a different statement. Anyway. So, and the Rebbe says like this: it's not just a question of. One could say like this: there's one can even learn Torah and say that the Torah itself is greater in that it brings to action, but the action that it brings is only because it enhances my Torah. Or one can learn the other way, where to begin with, my objective is to serve Hashem. In order to serve Hashem, I have to learn Torah. Fine, I'll learn Torah. And that's the proper way. That the Torah itself begins with lidei maisa, bringing to the hands of action. Not that it's not the action point. The point is it's the service of Hashem. If it's the service of Hashem, then automatically the Torah comes with proper behavior.
But isn't that go against a bit of what we learned on Shabbos about studying Torah, that it elevates that information? That study goes into the next world.
Only if it's done with the sake of I'm doing it for Hashem, because I'm looking to connect to Hashem in this thing. So if I'm looking to connect for Hashem if I'm looking to connect to Hashem through my Torah study, then when the Torah gives you a certain information, it's going to become personal. I can't say I can't learn the laws of tefillin, let's say, for the sake of connecting to Hashem and not put on tefillin later.
Yeah,
that's an inherent oxymoron, right?
A mitzvah connection to that study.
Has to be, if it's indeed for the sake of connecting to Hashem. And therefore, Deborah writes that the final travel, that they'll leave Refidim to get to Mount Sinai. Before they get to Mount Sinai, they'll leave this idea behind of Torah study for academic pursuit. Leave that behind. Leave this attitude, and then they can come to Mount Sinai. Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of counterparts between studying Torah and a physical act that's
Mhm.
associated with it. So,
Yeah. Sometimes it's a physical act, and sometimes it's also even an emotional response. In other words, a person's learning about, let's say, learning the philosophical parts of Torah, learning about the nature of Hashem or whatnot. So that itself could be just an academic pursuit to understand these fancy ideas, or it could be because I'm looking to strengthen my attachment to Hashem, which would mean that knowledge and abstract information should lead to my emotional reaction toward Hashem. So that's also, in a sense, a translation, not an action in terms of physical action, but in terms of my emotional response, which will lead to action, because my intensified love for Hashem will.
Passion for that particular thing.
So my intensified attachment to Hashem will then intensify. Either my action will actually change, or at least give my action more vigor if I'm already doing what I'm supposed to. Right? Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, further analyzing these ideas of the verses related to this whole episode. And here the Gemara makes a broad, sweeping statement, which is very interesting, and I was thinking a little bit about it. In other words, you can just take it on a technical level, or you can think about it a bit deeper. So first, the technical level. Rabbi Yochanan says, whenever the verse says the word, and he settled, it's only a question of pain associated with that. So he's about to cite, as we will do, he's about to cite a bunch of examples of the verse saying that someone settled, or something, or people settled, which led later to something negative. So you can leave it at that, face value, that the verse is using the word, and he settled, to indicate that something's going to happen negative. But why is that? Why is it that settled leads to pain? Leads to tsar, something negative. Why? Well, why? It could have been anything else. Why Vayeshev settled? So I was thinking perhaps that Vayeshev is a term means settled. It means it's a term used for complacency.
Some say stagnation.
Stagnation. So a person becomes complacent, becomes stagnant, not willing to grow, then a person's in decline. So for the verse alludes to negative interaction, tsar, as the Rabbi Yochanan puts it, associated with Vayeshev. Being settled, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm happy, leave me alone. And that's when things go wrong. And as we'll see.
Parsha.
Sorry?
It's a Parsha called Vayeshev.
Yeah, actually that's one of the examples the Gemara is going to quote.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Even though...
It's got to be positive then.
Yeah, well, we're going to see. And it's interesting because... Okay, let's see. So here are the examples of the term Vayeshev that then leads to tsar, to pain, to negativity. So Shenemar, as the verse reads, example number 1 comes from our most recent episode discussed here in the Gemara, which is Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim, and the Jews settled in Shittim, which, as we just discussed, good morning, is Vayechel Mazanes Banes B'Oyav, which leads right away to the people behaving, the introductory verse to describe the Jews behaving promiscuously with the Moabites, as described earlier, based on Balaam's advice, begins with Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim, and the Jews settled Vayeshev in Shittim. So that's the first example of the word Vayeshev leading to negativity. The next one, Vayeshev Yaakov Eretz Mogurei Aviv Eretz Canaan, and Yaakov settled in the land of his forefathers Eretz Canaan. This is the first time he settled. This isn't Parshas Vayeshev when he's in Mitzrayim. That will come up soon. But this is Yaakov being settled earlier. This is after he deals with his issue with Esav. He then settles in Canaan after getting his father's inheritance and whatnot. He settled in Canaan. Actually, no, his father's still alive then. I'm sorry, his father's still alive then. But he deals with his Esav. Esav leaves, and he stays in Canaan, in the land of his forefathers, after being away at the house of Lavan for all those years. And then, a little while later, Yosef, as the Basam Ra al Avim, Yosef brings a negative report about his brothers, and that begins the jealousy, and that begins the downward spiral of Yosef being sold into slavery, and the ensuing drama. That all begins with Vayeshev. Yaakov settled in the land of his forefathers. Another one, and this is the one you were referring to, the Parsha Vayeshev. Remember it says Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Goshen.
Vayeshev is Vayeshev Yaakov, that's the Parsha.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. This is the first. That's right.
Yeah.
You're right. Vayeshev Yisrael comes much later.
It's in Parsha.
That's already when he moves there. When he moves there, that's in Miketz.
That's the end of right at the end of Vayigash.
Before Miketz, just before Miketz.
And Miketz is after. This is they're already settling in Egypt, And then there's
after he comes and negotiates with Pare, and then Pare gives him the land of Goshen, he goes to settle there.
yeah.
Yeah. So Vayeshev Yisrael Beretz Goshen, and this is when Yaakov, known as Yisrael, also settles in the land of Goshen after Yosef negotiates for that region of Mitzrayim for his brothers and father. And then a little while later, 2 verses later, says the verse Vayikra v'mei Yisrael lamos, that the days of Israel were numbered. Israel meaning Yaakov, to come towards his death, essentially his passing. So again, settled leading to something negative. Okay, I'm just going to finish these verses and I want to comment on what you said. This is a verse in the book of Kings describing that Judah and Israel settled. Everybody was secure, and each man under his fig tree and each man under his vineyard. Everything was fantastic. This is at the beginning of King Solomon's reign, and then the verse reads a little while later, "Vayokam Hashem Satan l'shlema," and Hashem brought forth a Satan for King Solomon. Namely, Hadad the Edomite, Mizera HaMelech Hu Be'edom, from the progeny of the kings of Edom, and he started to bother Shlomo HaMelech. Okay, so these are all the examples of people settled and eventually coming to negativity. If we're going to read this to mean complacency, where a person's stagnant and therefore that begins the degeneration, then we might actually say, using your example of, it's not exactly the Parsha Vayeshev, but
It is, because he wanted to retire, and then already says
Bikesh, right, so Bikesh Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva. Yaakov wanted to sit and be in peace already, but then
retirement, that's it, get enough.
Wanted to have enough. And
Best years of his life.
But that comes later.
His own admission.
That's right.
No, coming up, no.
That's later, one second. So, but in both, but both of those examples are examples of the negativity that's brought here. So which means even spiritual complacency is a negative here.
That's part of the problem.
So when Yaakov says, just leave me alone already, I've dealt with Lavan, I'm done my mission in life, let me enjoy it. As soon as you do that, your guard's down, decline. Same thing with finally gets to Egypt, and he says, okay, I'm fine, I'm happy, let me settle in Goshen. And then it comes, the tsar, the pain comes right afterwards.
Well, actually, Yeshu Yisrael could also be the Jewish people who settled in Mitzrayim, because it's in plural. They took all the land and so on.
Yeah.
It seems they weren't growing anymore. They're getting complacent in Galut with the property.
That's
and
right.
And
either way, so this is like it's similar to that which it's actually a pasuk, but as Tanya elaborates on that in Perek and Gimel. The pasuk is those 2 psukim. One is the Pesach Revetz Chatas, that sin crouches at the door like a lion, and the other one is another pasuk. David Melech says, "V'chatasi negdi samud." My sin is always opposite me. He always thinks about a sin right in front of him. And as the Alter elaborates, that even someone based on the vow that the soul takes before it comes to the body, that even if everybody would tell you you're a tzaddik, you should see yourself as a sinner. That doesn't mean you should lie to yourself and say, I'm sinning, even though you're not sinning. But it means you're always capable of, like a Beinoni who's always on guard. But the moment you put that guard down and say, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm arrived, that's when you're in trouble. So a person has to always be on guard and know that he's always capable of slipping back unless he's moving forward.
Like your father said at the bringing on Shabbos.
Yeah.
Kind of, I've given so many years to this shul. I've paid my dues already. It's time for me to step back and let.
Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way.
As soon as you do that,
there's no concept of I've paid my dues and I could sit back and watch everybody else do the work.
As soon as it's Vayeshev, as soon as a person settles and says, "No, I'm okay," that's when things start to slip. The person has to constantly be. The truth is, it's even in it's even physiologically, like when the Rebbe once spoke about retirement. The Rebbe spoke once
Retirement, exactly.
about retirement.
Yeah.
They didn't like the idea of retirement. That basically companies are taking old people and shelving them, and then slowly you see them degenerate because they have nothing to keep their minds occupied, nothing to keep them going. And Deborah even suggested a practical solution that companies should keep them on as consultants, and let the younger new people consult with the older people so that they should feel they are valued because of their knowledge, and their value should be taken advantage of, not just for the sake of the company who gets their knowledge, but actually for the sake of the elder themselves, that they feel engaged. It keeps them literally keep them alive. Literally can keep someone alive, just being engaged mentally. Right? That's the famous story that Telushkin says his father was Rebbe's accountant. His father was the Rebbe's accountant for many years, and Rabbi Talishkin, Joseph Talishkin. And
He wrote a
his
book, didn't
he wrote the book. So in the book he writes about
About the Rebbe.
a personal, So most of the book is not personal accounts, it's research that he did, but here's a personal story that his father was the Rebbe's accountant, and his father got sick, and then he gets sick. They get a call from the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe has an accounting question for him. And he, as a son, was annoyed. What's this Rebbe bothering my father? He's like, he wasn't a chassid necessarily. He's like, why is this guy's he doesn't know my father's sick? What's he asking him questions? Anyway, he said when the question arrived and my father was doing it, I realized that the Rebbe sent him a very, very simple question that the Rebbe could have figured out himself. But he's sitting in the hospital. He's feeling useless, as it were. Feeling invalid. And they gave him, I still need you. I need you to answer my questions. I still have problems. I still have things to do. Right? So it's not just a spiritual thing. Well, I will put it this way. It starts off as a spiritual truth. And as a result of the fact that it's a spiritual truth, it's also a physiological truth that a person has to keep his mind engaged. And as soon as Vayeshev, as soon as the person's settled, complacent, I'm done, I'm finished, that's when Tsar happens. That's when
Similar story with
generation.
When you were in yeshiva, that kept that older fellow on payroll.
Yeah.
Just to sit there and just so you could watch him.
Yeah, this famous Mecholder Alter in Lubavitch was a mashpia. I don't know. It's interesting. I never thought of it in that context. But the story is that Mecholder Alter is a famous Mecholder. He's called Blina the Blind, Mechol the Blind, or Mechol the Elder. I can't remember his actual last name. He's a mashpia in Lubavitch, in the town of Lubavitch. In Russia for many years, he was a teacher, and then at one point he wasn't able to give a class anymore. He's too old, so they wanted to retire him. He's costing the yeshiva a salary. The previous Rebbe said to keep him on payroll, just so the Bochum can see him daven. Just that the students should watch what a chassid looks like daven. But I never thought of it in terms of, for his benefit. I always thought of it in terms of the yeshiva's benefit. But it could be for his benefit also. Mm-hmm. His davening will be better because he knows he's on payroll to daven. Okay, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Good day.
And more analyzation on Bilam coming tomorrow, God willing.